Hi, welcome to another episode of Ajita Nathaki. I am Oshaya. This is the follow-up episode to the one on reincarnation. This one is a topic that was suggested to me, and it has to do with group karma. And so you may have heard of individual karma. So what is this thing of group karma? Oh, and by the way, I do wear glasses. I try to avoid this reflection here, and I've been playing with the lights here, shutting up on my face, and yeah, so I'm having to look at a very bright light while I look at the camera, and it's super annoying, and I can't read my notes properly, and now I have a headache. So I'm trying to hope you understand. Just do what I can to make sure that I can read my notes and still have a little bit of light. It's a little off center, so I'm going to try not to look in that direction. But anyway, here we are. Um, okay, so this one has to do with group karma. All right. So if you will recall, if you have looked at the other, rather you listened, watched the other episode, the one just prior to this one, I spoke about karma and how it impacts individuals, right? So uh, I'm going to explain this notion as it applies to well, the idea of the reincarnation of individuals. But the thing is that we incarnate as those soul groups because we have particular lessons to go through, right? So if you were in an oppressive marriage, then and your wife was submissive, there is obviously the individual karma between the two spouses, one being oppressive and domineering, and the other one being too submissive and not standing up for herself. All right, so there is that individual karma and that relationship karma, but there is also that kind of a relationship exists or existed in a certain community, a certain culture, right? And so that culture, that community, if that is the norm for a marriage, then that culture has also its own karma, its own things to deal with, right? If you think about it, God treats each one of us, considers each one of us with the same value, the same amount of love, the same amount of care. In the visions that I have seen of that, it's the most blissful, loving, accepting experience. The hard to describe. I hope that I can do a little bit of justice to it. But there is no sense of one being better than another, being greater than another. Even the entities that we consider to be divine beings, angels or Buddha or any of those, they are held in the same value as any one of you. And so for any culture to limit one individual because of a gender stereotype, because of a cultural belief, because of a tradition, is to limit that soul's expression. And it is not in the soul's best interest to be constrained in that manner. And so therefore there is a cultural karma, or rather a group karma for that community. And I'll give you a few examples of what I mean by that. All right, so now before I move on with this, I also want to cover the idea that if you're holding on to the thought that you reincarnate as soul groups, and that you are therefore in the same family, and the family is resident in a particular geographical location, let's say for example Ireland, right? And you were a father in Ireland, and you have your children in Ireland, and all your friends and family for generations they're going to be in Ireland. No, that's not the case. Biologically perhaps, but spiritually, no, that is not the case, because great grandparents of certain individuals may have nothing in common, no impact on the lifetime of those other human beings. And so soul groups actually move geographically from one place to another because of the particular experiences that those communities, those laws, those environments will provide us opportunities for growth for these souls. And mind you that there is an almost infinite number of lessons and ways that we can develop, and we need a variety of experiences to get through all of the lessons that we must learn, to get past all of the tests that we must pass. And so you will be born in different time periods, in different countries. You will speak different languages over different lifetimes. And so don't hold on to this notion that, if you are Chinese, you will always and forever be That's not the case. Or that you're, white and you'll forever be white. No, you will be you have been every race, every gender expression, everything that encompasses human experience. You have been those or will be those. And so that means that as a soul group, then we migrate from country to country, time to time, and we have different experiences. And I'll just share a couple of, mind you, this is just a handful of the lifetimes that I have had. I'm going to refrain from sharing any famous individuals other than this first one, because he's not that big of a name, but you will be able to find him if you do a search. I was a Christian missionary, I believe in the 1400s or thereabouts, 1300s, I don't recall, by the name of Matthias Ricci. And if I remember correctly, I was Italian, and I went to China with the idea of spreading Christianity there. And I have a very vivid recollection of being in my study, being alone, and how that felt, just that loneliness and being isolated, even though I was surrounded by other human beings that appreciated my presence. And I remember also being surrounded by children and just enjoying that interaction with them. Anyway, so that was an Italian missionary going to China. I was also, and don't laugh, but I was also a blonde prostitute in Europe. And I saw myself in the mirror, so my bedroom based on a reflection in the mirror. So I'm gonna say probably late 1800s, thereabouts. No idea what the name was or the circumstances, although I know that I lived in just sheer desperation, sadness, just this overwhelming sadness. Because I had this child, and I also saw the child in this vision, and he was also blonde and about 5 or 6 years old, and I couldn't provide for this child, and I just felt like I wasn't, like that I should have done, I don't know exactly, but like the desperation that such an individual must feel at not being able to provide for their child. Imagine that feeling. That's what I remember from that vision. I was also an Iroquois. In this particular vision, I had a rifle in my hand, didn't quite know what to expect from it. I fired it against a young sapling, and I was completely taken by surprise by how it just obliterated the tree. And mind you, this is a rifle, not a musket. So I'm guessing that this was probably either before or after that experience, probably before, now that I think about it. Well, I don't know exactly, but guns and whatnot, I'm not sure what came first. But close enough to that experience. I was also an Aztec prince, male, and I remember being in Chichen Itza. Now that is Maya, so I know which is which. But I remember being at the stadium and just staring up at the hoops, and then looking at the carving in stone on the side of the stadium depicting the decapitation of the winning captain. And I just stood there transfixed looking at this while my tour group went on without me. And it was several minutes later, maybe 5 or 10, that I realized I was standing there alone. And then I had to run and catch up to them. And I was just like, why was I so captivated by that? So I had a friend do a spiritual regression on me, and based on some other things that I was dealing with at the time. And he explained that I was that and later on I had a dream vision about it. So it was interesting that, anyway, so I've been Aztec as well. I was also a gay Roman guard, male. In that particular past life regression, and this one was more of a hypnotic regression that I went through, I could not get past the sandals because it made no sense to me. At the time, I had no idea of how, footwear was back in the Roman period, but it made no sense to me because I saw it. I go, that doesn't make any sense, and it just my Oshaya brain processing the information just could not get past the illogicalness of it, and so I couldn't go any further than that. But my friend was there as a psychic and was able to see the experience, and then I had a dream vision about it, which confirmed everything that he said. I guess it took in both of those instances his being able to see past that limitation and telling me this is what happened, and then I was granted the full vision of that experience. Well, in that particular one, what I couldn't get past is the sandals. The sandals are basically, plain leather with a, strap, so your toes are basically exposed to the elements, but then there's a metal covering on top. And that's the part that didn't make any sense to me. It's like, why would you have metal over a bare foot? And then it's loose, even that. I mean, like, it could do this. It made no sense to me, right? But, many years later, by the way, many years later, I looked that up, and I found out that that's how, Roman soldiers walked around, that they had sandals and, some thin metal plating that covered their feet. From my point of view, stupid, but that's how it was. Anyway, so we live in multiple regions, multiple time periods in order to have these experiences. And we move through time, through geographies, in order to learn what we need to learn, right? So, as I mentioned earlier, we have group, like a community karma, in the example that I gave of the husband and wife that were in that oppressive relationship, which was condoned by the community in which they resided. So in that sense, then, that community has that group karma to deal with, okay? Now, this particular example is, and actually I have maybe a couple, are from the work of Edgar Cayce. And, being of Mexican descent, I have a particular interest, I guess you could say, for, what happened with Mexica. These are the Aztecs. That's the real name, is Mexica. And there are a lot of Latinos that I've known over the years who bemoan the Spaniards and say, if it hadn't been for that, I mean, they destroyed a great civilization, the most advanced civilization that the world knew at that time, which is true in a certain sense. I mean, in terms of science and city building, Europe could not touch the Mexica, not by a long shot. Just the infrastructure that they were able to create and manage just blew the minds of the Spaniards when they were there. They could not conceive of what was happening in front of them. But the Mexica were, they believed in ritual sacrifice. And in order to appease the gods, the Mexica in power would take unwilling volunteers, so to speak, from the neighboring tribes. And so the neighboring tribes were oppressed, very, very much oppressed. There are different historical records of these ritual sacrifices, but one of them in particular I just have in my mind, of over 250,000 human beings that were sacrificed on one occasion. Now, it took place over multiple days because they couldn't possibly kill everyone on the same day. So it was weeks of just blood flowing from the steps of the pyramids. And this is documented. They have found scientific evidence of this incident. And so, you cannot have that continue. Just that amount of human suffering and violence, just that could not continue. And so someone had to come and put a stop to it, right? So that was the role of the Spaniards. Most of what they did was to bring disease, unwittingly, but disease nonetheless. But it was the intent of the Spaniards to take as much gold and riches as they could, regardless of what happened to the indigenous populations. There are many accounts, and you can read these for yourselves. The history is quite clear on this. They made promises, and then they killed everybody involved, and they just took whatever they could. Okay, so then the Spaniards then have a karma. Even though they went in there in a sense to purge what the Mexica were doing to their neighboring communities, the Spaniards nonetheless engendered a group karma. According to Casey, that group karma is what led to the Spanish Civil War under Franco. And so that turmoil where Spaniard against Spaniard took place, it had its roots in the mass murders of the Americas. Okay, so there is a group karma, and notice that it may have happened in one location, but the group was somewhere else. Okay, so there is that group karma that must be played out. I'm going to point you in the direction of another channel. I have not seen a lot of recent videos from this channel, but the ones that are there are superb. They really, really do a good job. I'm going to point you towards Macmillan Media. That channel is devoted to explaining the works of Edgar Casey in 3D animations, which I think, even though they're a little rough, they're actually pretty good in terms of explaining what the readings show about individuals. But there he does a whole series on reincarnation, dealing with groups in England, another series for those in France, and I believe that there is one for the Americas and some other groups. So if you want to get more examples, direct examples of group karma and it playing itself out, watch that YouTube channel, Macmillan Media. All right, so what does that portend for the United States? We had our episode of slavery, and then we had the Civil War. So does that mean that the Civil War played out the karma of the slavery period? Not necessarily, because we still have racist policies. We still have, in a sense, Jim Crow laws. And America as a country has to come out of that. We must then acknowledge our racist past, deal with it positively, and spiritual development cannot be legislated. This must come from each individual. So while the overall society has a responsibility for its past, it must nonetheless be borne out by each individual. So yes, America is a country with a racist background, racist past, but it is up to each individual to break that cycle. You must let go of those old notions of superiority, of separation, of otherness, and understand that each and every single human being is God expressing herself in another way, having another set of experiences, and understand that that other human being is a reflection of you. We are a drop of water in the ocean that is God. To hate any other drop in the ocean is to hate the ocean, is to hate yourself. It makes no sense. So, there's a reason why I've been resistant about doing this whole video series, because the knowledge is already out there. If you read the Sermon on the Mount, that's all you need to know. However, even though it's in such black and white terms, it's so clear. Love thy neighbor. Love thy enemy as thyself, because she is yourself. And I guess that's the reason for this video series, is to explain what that actually means. To express in a different way that hopefully will resonate with you, given the current realities that we're living in America, in the world, that you'll get past that stubbornness and thinking that, oh, that was for them that time. It doesn't really apply to now. There's so much violence. I cannot love him. I cannot accept those people. No, it applies now. Love thy neighbor, love thy enemy as thyself. It is true then, it is true now, it will forever be true. If you want to break this cycle of group karma in the United States, you cannot hold on to that anger. You cannot react in violence. And one thing is to do, like, okay, I'm gonna stop being hateful. I'm gonna stop promoting violence. I'm gonna stop all those things, right? It's one thing to just stop and do or be positive, right? It's another thing to actually hold that feeling in your heart, to actually love the other, to be compassionate of the other. You know, I'm not going to legitimize one side or the other, because I can do that, but I don't want to get lost in the rabbit hole. Instead, understand that racism is learned. A child grew up in that environment and accepted those ideas because that's what was passed on. We are born into the other group's experience so that we learn to appreciate the other's point of view, the other's emotions. So you may be of the dominant culture now, but you will be of the minority in a future life if you haven't learned your lesson, if you haven't learned to love and accept. And so if you want to keep continuing that cycle of oppression, of the oppressed, of victimization, then continue hating, continue holding on to your notion that, you know, that somehow you are the correct one and everybody else is wrong, and rather understand that we are caught up in this cycle, and the only way to break free is to forgive one another, to accept one another, and love one another. And that's how you break group karma. Thank you.